website using robotics and machinery. So you would know it in the context of very large banks here in New York or very large healthcare systems. So kind of everything broad spectrum, but it's really providing a tech infusion to, like I said, a very old process that's been around for hundreds of years. So when we think about automated technologies, and specifically what we're going to talk about today, there's really two branches. There's artificial intelligence and then robotics. The big difference for anyone who's kind of new to this space, AI is really the art of simulating human intelligence through computer programs. So at home, that would be any of us who are using Netflix, and it's clever enough to suggest the next television series that we should binge watch on the weekend. That's an AI system. Versus robotics, which is basically programmable, either automated or semi-automated machinery. So you kind of think about AI as the brains, and then robotics as the body. And our panel here this morning is going to focus on robotics, with the next panel after us focusing on artificial intelligence. So with that, we were all obviously asked to sit on this panel because we work in some form of robotics, and that we are disrupting different parts of the real estate industry. So I might just start with Jiren. If you would mind just introducing yourself, your company, and then specifically how you touch robotics in this space.
Hey, good morning. My name is Jiren Schwartz from Tel Aviv, founder and CEO of ASDAIRE Robotics. We have an automated solution for window cleaning for skyscrapers, commercial buildings, so anything on the outside. And really our purpose of existence is to minimize human risk at heights to zero, and so across all industries. The way we utilize robotics is we take off-the-shelf components, whether it's robotic arms, the same ones as used in automotive, pick-and-place factories, and we completely reprogram them to be able to fit the outdoor environments. And then with a lot of software and sensor packages, we basically enable these arms to be somewhat animated, in which, I mean, they can react to the changing environment based on a whole bunch of AI machine learning that sits underneath.
Yeah, hi, my name is Bruce Welty, and so my current job is I'm the CEO of a company called Robotics, and prior to that, and in fact, when they invited me to speak, I was employed by a company called Robotics, and I was the founder and chairman there. We actually sold, or Quiet Logistics was acquired by a real estate firm, and unfortunately I can't tell you who that is. We were hoping to have the press release out by today, but it didn't happen. So I have the unique distinction of being both a manufacturer of robots and a customer and user of robots. And if you're on your phone, you can Google both Quiet Logistics and Locus Robotics, and you'll see the robots that we use. We've spent millions of dollars on both buying and manufacturing robots, and I think that what ties this all together is the fact that the industry we're in, which is fulfilling consumer orders, B2C or e-commerce, as it's known, sort of what Amazon does, is really now as much as anything a real estate play. And what we're trying to figure out is how to decrease the cost in that model. So we decided one of the great ways to do that is by augmenting humans with robots. And so we have been working on collaborative robots for many years. And now that we have a real estate investor involved in our business, we anticipate taking this optimization into the building. So now we're starting to think about how to make, instead of making our solutions work in the existing buildings, we're trying to figure out how to make the buildings optimized around our solutions. So as John said, he's right about it, he's a tech company. We're all tech companies now, and I think it's important that we vertically integrate all these pieces.
Hi, so I'm Miguel. I'm the principal software engineer at Robotics. We're a bit an odd duck here because our company basically is at an intersection between AI use and robotics. The robotics use case will be something that you guys have all heard of and kind of anticipate or fear to a certain extent, which is autonomous vehicles. But really, that's kind of a side diversion because What our company does is takes asset inspection and evaluation, which is generally a very labor-intensive process, and which is, to be honest, a known practice that has been around since assets were first created, but whose practice is more often observed in the breach. Folks don't do inspection enough, they don't do evaluation enough. And our company was formed basically to replace a labor-intensive process of doing so with a more or less automated process of doing so. So hope to talk a little bit more about that later.
Thanks. My name is Justin Palmer. I'm the founder and CEO of Synapse Development Group. I would say we are an traditional real estate developer. Also a little bit of an odd duck, but I believe in everything that John said. We started the company with a vision to focus on building science and innovation. After acquiring, renovating, and building about $250 million worth of real estate, we've decided to focus solely on the technology component of our business and trying to solve affordable housing by bringing down construction costs, which obviously involves a lot of automation and robotics. And we're starting to explore the manufacturing component, how to get sensors in all of our buildings, and really create the residential brand of the future.
So obviously the introduction of robots into a process is typically to be able to alleviate a gap that exists in the industry or address a specific need that's not being met by current processes or services. I'd be curious to kind of hear from you guys, and I also have an opinion on this topic. What gaps were you filling in the industry specifically that created an opportunity for us to move to automation? And what kind of movement from a macro scale do you sort of see in starting to bridge that? And actually, Aaron, I will start with you because I think you guys are filling a very, very specific gap, if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah, I think the use case that at least I'm speaking about today is pretty straightforward. So up until still today, people are hanging hundreds of feet in the air cleaning windows, and we take those people out of dangerous jobs with robots instead. So that's literally the gap we're filling. But if we think of this on a little bit broader, more macro scale, we're looking at an entire new era in terms of business model. If the 90s gave us SaaS, software as a service, then now we're in the age of RaaS, robotics as a service, which is basically SaaS with a hardware component. I don't so much see the distinction between AI and robotics. Just to state that, I don't see robotics working without AI, at least in the outdoors. Factories are more machine than robotics. And in this age of RaaS, what we're going to see are dangerous and or mundane tasks and or expensive tasks, either on the individual or at the large scale, that will be automated. And if anything, if not for anything, then just for the price performance of robotics versus humans.
Yeah, I think the idea that it's going to be dangerous and mundane tasks is absolutely right. A lot of the jobs that we're trying to fill in our warehouse are pretty mundane, and it's very hard to find people that aspire to do this. Sort of like grocery shopping all day, and I'm sure none of us would want to do that. So we have the combined problem of availability and cost. So our problem is really, the gap we're filling is simply labor.
I think dangerous and mundane is really the correct theme here. In our case, road inspection, which is our primary product at the moment, is something that's actually been done since the time of the Romans. Julius Caesar, one of his first military jobs was actually as a road inspector, and part of, kind of the greatness of the Roman Empire was an emphasis on infrastructure and basically high maintenance. But as anybody who's driven around any major American city can tell, due to the high labor costs of asset inspection, we just don't do it anymore, or we pretend to ourselves that we are doing it. But it's highly mundane. In the case of road inspection, it can actually be quite dangerous to the inspectors who are getting out there on the roads. And we're basically offering a solution that is both cheaper, more useful, but far less dangerous.
Yeah, I think I have a little bit of a hands-on take to the real estate business and the construction business in general. And having gone through the pain of the last 6 years of developing properties on two coasts in arguably what's one of the busiest construction cycles that's ever existed in urban markets, we've learned the challenges and the wrong ways to do things, and spending the time and resources to manage construction where you have very little transparency to the data and very little quality control on the job site when you're funding, hundreds of millions of dollars into a project. That was just really not palatable for me to spend the next 5 years of my life. And I took a step back about a year ago and said, do we want to keep building the same way, the same inefficient process, or do we want to try to come up with a solution? Right? I'm really passionate about the built environment, and it's something that housing is something that I truly care about, and I think we have some big challenges in this country. And when you take a step back and look at what the biggest issues are, it's really the construction labor market. And when you start looking at the inefficiencies of the labor market and the lack of transparency in that, there's huge opportunities to prefabricate and panelize and manufacture. For our buildings specifically, we build the passive house standards for our new construction, and to control the quality on the building envelope, we really need an automated factory production operation. And so that was sort of the impetus for us to push into the space, and really we actually decided to sell some land not too far from here, from the standpoint that we didn't want to go through the process the same way with 30 consultants that don't talk to each other, and you're paying everybody overtime, and your project's late, and it costs you more than you thought. It really is not a great way to spend your day.
I'll actually build on that, because I was also going to speak to some of the inefficiencies in construction and why that has opened up a really unique opportunity. I think a lot of the time, and this is a next question for the panel, a lot of the time there's a lot of fear-mongering about this advance in technology, and John did a great job of kind of eloquently addressing that. But construction, I think, is quite unique in that it only has upside. And what I mean by that is, if you look at the construction labor market, which Justin has mentioned, that's actually plummeting. Some of the stats show for every 4 baby boomers that are retiring out of trades and out of the industry, we actually only have 1 skilled tradesperson that's coming in to replace them in the workforce. Beyond that, we have unprecedented demand and growth for real estate. And at a macro level, all of the data, no matter if you read a McKinsey report or a World Economic Forum or a Boston Consulting Group, all of the data shows us that construction is only less innovative than agriculture and hunting in terms of its adoption of technology. And that construction actually is the only industry that over the last 30 years has declined in productivity. So whereas most productivity graphs on a global scale are skyrocketing through the use of tech, because construction hasn't embraced technology, it's actually plummeting, and we've seen a decrease. So when we think about introducing automation and robotics, there's actually this very, very unique opportunity in construction. And so specifically for us, I always give the example, we can do 150 electrical drops a day in the factory, whereas it would take a skilled tradesperson probably a day to do 4 to 6. So there's huge economies of scale, but there's also this need that's starting to develop. New York, because of the unions, is an awesome place to work still. So we're kind of the last frontier in experiencing that. But if any of you are doing business on the West Coast or in Texas, there's a huge labor shortage right now that's widening, and we're going to have to look at automation and prefab just as a solution to that. So kind of dovetailing off of that, there's obviously, like I said, a lot of fear-mongering that comes with anytime we talk about introducing technology. And Steve actually referenced something that I was going to call upon as well, which is we've had this same sort of fear in every industrial revolution that's happened in history. So when we replaced a lot of farm workers with automated farming tools, there was a fear that they would no longer have work, and then all of a sudden they had industrialized jobs. Follow that with the Industrial Revolution, and then we saw them move into more white-collar workforce. Having said that, the New York Times actually released an article last week, which was kind of off topic for them because they're usually very pro-automation. And in the article, they said that in the past, the technology has yielded higher income for workers and more sophisticated products and services for them to buy. But they said this industrial revolution is different, and obviously referring to what many are calling the 4th industrial revolution. They said, unlike in the past, this industrial revolution shows small groups of well-educated professionals that are enjoying the rise in wages thanks to robots and automation, while most workers are toiling in low-wage jobs with very few chances of advancement. So that was kind of a very dire look at what we have ahead of us. And in opposition to what John
Yeah, I get that question all the time, and I actually was quizzed by Steve Croft on 60 Minutes, and he asked me the question 20 times. I answered it only once, and that was what they posted on the magazine. So and that was in 2013. So I guess my view is that it's sort of beyond my pay grade to try to figure out that question. My job is to do this delivery of products to people's homes, and I try to do that the lowest cost possible and as quickly as possible, and robots help me do that. I think about it in a broader context and try to say, is this really a problem for the world? And I think that everybody's sort of jumping to conclusions here on robots. John touched on this in his talk, but we can only tell robots to do things that we can explain to a computer. Computers are really good at computing, but they're fairly bad at doing things that humans are good at. There's actually a paradox called Moravec's paradox. It says that very thing. Computers are good at things humans are not good at, and vice versa. So I just think that we need to continue to make jobs more human centric and have tasks be more robot centric. And people will quickly learn as they do that if you're doing a job that a computer can, a robot can do better than you, then you better get a new job. And there's just so much out there to do right now. And in our world, we just can't find enough labor. So I just don't worry about it.
That's actually a really interesting distinction you just made. So you talked about jobs versus tasks, which I've never really heard it phrased that way. Miguel, that maybe relates back to what you guys were talking about, because you're kind of democratizing how you're cultivating information, and instead of making that a job, you are making that a task, but it's something that can be done by anyone.
Yeah. One thing I think that's kind of interesting to go back to was John's example of the operating system where a property manager is getting this kind of data and is able to act on it much more quickly. My suspicion is that in the same sense that if you have a job that a machine can do better, you're kind of probably should be looking for a different kind of job. I think the nature of which jobs humans will do will largely remain the same for some time to come. They'll be executive, higher level, creative thinking type jobs. So for instance, in our use case, asset owners, road network maintainers, they would like to have this information about the roads. They just don't feel like getting in a truck and driving 2,000 miles of a road network and taking detailed notes and then coming back and trying to synthesize this. They want like the operating system, they want the data, they want these things to be there so that they can think on a higher plane. And I think more and more jobs will basically evolve that make use of these kinds of higher level functions.
Yeah, I think a really important distinction to make is machines have come into other industries, the auto industry, and several other industries, and changed the nature of work. And I mean, I'm just recalling when I was in college, the big topic in business was outsourcing, and there was a massive impact on the American economy, and the American economy shifted to a heavily technology-oriented economy and has seen tremendous growth, and we've stayed on top of the world in terms of leading innovation and vision. And I think this is just a natural reordering of certain low-skilled jobs. To your earlier point, I don't think anybody wakes up and says, I want to paint drywall for a living on commercial buildings, right? And I think there's a lot of opportunities for some of these union workers even to get retrained because they have such political control in urban markets right now where you mentioned labor shortages. There's labor shortages in every major urban market in the country right now. And construction costs are completely out of control to the point where in a city like San Francisco, there's plenty of land to build. Land costs are cheap still because the entitlement process is so risky. California is a really challenging and interesting place to do business. But the laborers union has to sign on for you to get your permits, right? So when you pitch something like affordable housing and you've got the plumbers union, the electricians union, the steelworkers union, and all these guys blocking the ability to build at the market rate without using their labor that's an exorbitant price, and frankly it's inefficient, right? We built with a very well-known global contractor in San Francisco that was probably one of the most inefficient processes I've ever experienced. And that's just not viable, right? I mean, I'm taking a step back. We're at a pivot point in our society. Steve mentioned universal basic income, and I think that may, as much as I hate to say it, it may be a good bridge or some structure similar to that to retrain some of these workers, right? And it's going to be the same. We need to learn from what happened in the auto manufacturing business, where if you go through the Midwest right now, those cities are decimated, right? And people are out of jobs and they're going to food banks where they were middle class people in the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s when car production was at its highest from a manual perspective. And we need to take that as a learning lesson and figure out how to design around that to give people better quality lives.
Actually, I'm going to be maybe the black sheep here. Bruce, I couldn't disagree with you more. And jobs aren't coming back. Show me a job anywhere in the world today, any sector, anything, and I'll show you a machine that can do it better. At the end of the day, we're looking at computational problems. Task, job, employment, pastime, doesn't matter. It's a computational problem. And if you can compute enough data about the specific world that you need to automate, then you'll be able to automate it. And today we see not only low-grade jobs like construction workers or window cleaners being automated, but we see lawyers, high-paid jobs, high-skilled, being automated because it's a computational problem. And yes, I think we will see executives managing workforce tasks and so on and robots, not because they're needed, but because this is the paradigm we're in. And the people that are in power right now are not going to relinquish their power and relinquish their positions, although they're not needed anymore, which, in my opinion, will prevent costs from actually declining because we're still going to be paying out those people rather than utilizing the maximum benefit and efficiency of robotics and automation. And to speak about the union issue in work, I actually don't think it's a people problem from the low-end side. I think it's a government and regulation problem from the high-end side. And if government incentivized actually building efficiently at low costs, then that's how the market would translate itself into actually creating housing. But right now it doesn't. We incentivize this kind of prolonged process of inefficiency because we think that the work paradigm we're in is the correct one to be in. And in this country, it's really hard to say, look, let's change the work-leisure paradigm because then, you know, the kind of 1950s, 60s, 70s stereotypes like, oh, you're a socialist. No, I think it's better for capitalism to actually stop people from having to go to work. People need to have things to do in their life, but that doesn't have to necessarily correlate to income. And once we decouple these two things, then I think we'll be able to truly unleash the benefit of robotics and automation in whichever sector.
You said you were the black sheep, but you came around and kind of agreed with Justin on the end there.
Yeah,
I don't disagree with anything you said. I mean, I think this is a political problem, right?
Yeah, no,
I think people fear change, right?
Oh, definitely.
So we have time for just kind of one last question, then we'll open it up to the audience. And you've actually already addressed what I'm going to ask of Bruce and Miguel. What can companies do or governments, but what is the solution to help prepare us for what is coming from an automation standpoint? And I'll conclude with that, and then we'll open it up to you guys.
Okay, so we have a little bit of experience, at least in terms of when our company approaches municipal governments, one of the first things that folks are afraid of is, are you going to take away our jobs? Like, is this a solution that basically takes away our autonomy, our discretion to make decisions? And one of the most interesting things is we designed it very explicitly around that. One, because it's actually very hard to do for political reasons that actually end up kind of undergirding the actual decision making. There's kind of this superstratum of like politics and history and budgeting, and those are all things that we can't really feasibly at the moment attach as technical problems. We can only tell you the objective state of the world. So it's really interesting that once you kind of take away that fear of this is a replacement versus an augmentation, people start seeing a lot of possibilities in these kinds of technologies. So I think there's a certain extent to which kind of responsible, forward-thinking design can help, if not ultimately forestall, replacement. It can definitely at least be conceptualized as augmentation, and when you start from that, you get to a much friendlier product for the in-stream user.
So you're really asking what's coming next. Right?
What's coming next, but also how can we prepare for it?
Well, I wish I knew what was coming next. But I tend to think that what we're in now is a period where everybody is very excited about the progress we've made, and they're drawing this line that to them is a straight line. It says if we keep going at the pace we're going, we'll get to 100% solutions. And I think that that line looks more asymptotic. So I think what we're going to start to see is a lot of companies that have been super well funded with super ambitious goals are going to start to run into challenges. I think of it as the trouble lies at the edge. So as we get closer to solving some of these really hard robotic problems, we're going to find out that that the progress slows to the point where it becomes very expensive to actually get this item into the world of production. So I just have a very optimistic view that humans are going to continue to be a very important part of this technology, and that what we're going to do is create collaborations between robots and humans that will allow the human to be so much more productive. But I don't see us replacing them, and I think that there'll be tremendous opportunities for people to develop skills in the use of robots. We're sort of like 1985 in the world of PCs, and I'm always reluctant to make predictions, and I get asked a lot of questions, and it seems like all the writers take out all the bad parts of my quotes because nobody wants to actually hear somebody say things that aren't optimistic about robots. But I'm kind of a skeptic. I know how hard it is to take an idea from a laboratory into the real world, and you just don't know what you don't know, and then you just have to really be very clever to solve these problems, and they become harder and harder as time goes by. So I see a lot of programmers being very frustrated as they are given a task that may just be so daunting for them that they can't quite figure out how to do it, and in fact don't want to do it. So we like to just have the robot do as much of the job as we can and have the human fill in the gaps. And I think we're at the early innings. I don't really know where we're going with this thing, but we could spend the rest of our lives just optimizing the robots we've developed to make them do what they do better. But I don't think we're ever going to replace the human. So, I would not invest right now in certain technologies like robotic arms and hands. I think will be good to a point. I think autonomous driving cars are going to be a long way into the future. I don't think we're going to replace lawyers with computers and AI. I don't think every problem is a computational problem. And I'm glad they have disagreements because then people like you can make their own judgment.
Well, I'm married to a lawyer, so I'm glad I'm still going to have a different thing for that first. So I'll just conclude with my thoughts on that. I think we often consider ourselves bleeding edge in my company, which is painful, but we sort of see ourselves as an educator in the market and trying to help and convince, and case study is the best solution that we have for getting more and more people on side with this. If I can move a client into their space faster and give them a flexible asset while the GC has a much more profitable project and a faster project so they can get on to the next one, and that sort of trickles down through the rest of the chain. In terms of internally, we actually haven't downsized the number of people we use when we move to further and further automated processes. We just shift the workforce around. I think we're one of the only construction companies that has a 200-person software company. So I think reskilling, which Justin, you spent a lot of time speaking about, that's a huge part of where we see the onus on the corporate side in trying to change the workforce. So with that, we have about 5 minutes. We'll open it up if anyone has questions for the panel. Go for it.
Yes, I'm interested to understand, we're talking a lot about the how, but isn't it about the outcomes of which the how drives? So are any of you delivering outcome-centric services that mean the outcome, which is, I don't know, you're on you're going to clean the windows for X dollars a month, delivering an outcome. The robotics is the how you do it, but isn't it about the outcome
So we see ourselves as a service company. We use robotics, AI, machine learning, whatever buzzword you want to facilitate that. But yes, we see ourselves as an outcome, a service company. We can deliver to our clients a better, safer service than we do done our job.
You don't sell the equipment, you sell floor cleaning or buildings.
Yeah, Sky Robotics America is a window cleaning company.
I would just add that I think that's a really good question, and I think companies are going to start to be more mission driven. We're already seeing that across the board in other industries, and for my sort of primary question was, how can I create the most impact on the world? And I think the noble cause for a real estate developer with a track record who can raise capital today is try to solve affordable housing and focus on building science to reduce the carbon footprint. And so just kind of following on your question, I think mission-driven companies is the future, and that's going to be a natural shift because people get behind big movements that are for a good cause. And as the lower skilled jobs get automated, I think that's a great thing, right? I think it's a great thing for people to focus on what their outcome is in life, what their mission is in life, and what they want to get behind. And I think I think Tony Robbins said life begins at the edge of your comfort zone, and I think that's true for companies as well. It's like people need to start focusing on their mission.
So I'll just parallel that back into our space. If you think about literally every other industry in the world, they have had one, if not multiple, huge disruptions in the last 100 years. I mean, even healthcare has reinvented itself a bunch of times. Automotives, manufacturing has reinvented itself. Construction hasn't. So when we think about our mission and what the outcome is, our goal is to be able to keep all other things constant at the worst case scenario in terms of the budget and quality of the output, but to be able to do it significantly faster, safer, and with way better